You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Waltz.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. Today's episode is produced in collaboration with Leica Camera. Check out the link in our show notes to the Leica product page on the B&H website. And we thank Leica for introducing us to today's guest, photographer Misan Harriman. Misan was born in Nigeria but calls London home, and he's had quite a run these past few years, culminating in the September 2020 triple gatefold cover of British Vogue, in which he produced portraits of 20 social activists. Misan's work encompasses a range of styles from documentary and reportage to gorgeous portraiture of celebrities such as Meghan Markle, Rihanna, and Cate Blanchett. His work has been featured in Vanity Fair, Harper's Bazaar, People magazine, and The Telegraph, among others. And his images from Black Lives Matter protests lit up the sky in 2020. Welcome, Misan, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Before we begin, if you'd like to see some of the photographs we plan on talking about during the course of today's show, check out the show notes for this week's episode on the B&H Explorer website. Now, back to the show. Misan, you've been sort of a connoisseur of images. You started What We See, that's SEEE, an online image and content platform, but you only started photographing, let's say, quote unquote, professionally in the past several years. What did it take to make a midlife career switch? I mean, how did you overcome any hesitancies or insecurities about being able to walk up to somebody with a camera between your face and theirs, and then taking pictures and then getting them out to the people who make a difference about seeing it and getting where you are in a really short period of time?
Thank you for asking me that. And it's a very important question because I think my answer is needed. It's needed with the year that we've all had, that is 2020, and what we're all going through. So many of us are having this moment of deep reflection. And if I can be a living, breathing example of what it means to not be afraid, to take that road less traveled, then so be it. And my fear of not thinking I could do anything with a camera, my imposter syndrome held me back, even though I've been obsessed with the still and moving image my whole life, up until the point where my wife bought me a camera and she told me to go out and tell stories. And, initially I would say shooting the people that I love. I have 2 children under 3, and I really learned how to take pictures by documenting the joy in my life that I see in my 2 daughters. And then when I felt more comfortable with understanding the machinery that I was looking, I looked within myself. And a big part of photography has very little to do with technical capability and everything to do with understanding what your voice can and should be.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Continue. I'm sorry. I just had to throw that in. I strongly agree with what you just said there. Please go on.
So I spent a big part of my childhood obsessing over storytellers and, wanting to know how we as Homo sapiens were capable of magic. And what I mean by magic is what sets us truly apart from the rest of the animal kingdom is art, is culture. It's our ability to seemingly create universes of sound, of vision from within our inner souls. And I've been wondering whether I could be one of those storytellers since I was very little. And, I struggle from dyslexia, and I think a lot of people that struggle from dyslexia are actually pretty good photographers because we're usually visual learners. So I taught myself really with YouTube videos. I always say there are plenty of middle-aged men and women that have the answers for the questions you're looking for, whether your picture is over or underexposed, whether you don't fully understand how to use the aperture ring or what ISO values mean on a modern camera. There's always somebody there that can explain it in the language that you need. And I find that much more comfortable than a teacher or professor that can sometimes make you feel stupid just because you don't understand something. So, the loneliness, the solitude of knowledge is and always has been my best friend. So I've been really only taking pictures for the last 3.5 years, but I've been absolutely obsessed with image makers. From reading a lot about the Jewish immigrants that came over to New York with nothing left, literally nothing left but the cameras on their back, to the work of many idols of mine like Charlie Phillips and Gordon Parks and Sally Mann and Elliot Erwitt. I can go on all day. And I've watched as many documentaries as I could possibly find and read as many books as I could find of these people whose shoulders I believe I'm trying to stand on. The people that understood the responsibility of trying to be the custodian of truth with their camera, whether that's with landscape or photojournalism or fashion. It's a sense of documenting the human condition in a form that cannot be denied.
What I did want to pick up on, though, is something you referred to about storytelling and families. And there's a quote that I read here on your site. It says, if you've had a grandfather or a grandmother who endured violence, it becomes something far more personal. You're talking about hundreds of years of pain and memories that people have been holding on to and passing on through the generations. And I call them the walking wounded. And that triggered something because just yesterday, now that we've had our vaccines, we were able to go see your grandkids again, which is just a wonderful thing after all this time. And I brought a photograph of my great-grandparents from Poland, my mother's grandparents, my grandmother's parents, who were in Poland, Lublin, Poland. And it's the oldest photograph I have of anybody in my family. And I had a nice print of it that I made, and I was showing it to some of my older grandkids who are in their mid-teens. And I told them the story. I said, this is who they are. They're your great-great-great-grandparents, and what their names were. And I said that in 1943, when the Germans came into town, they were amongst the first people on their street who were taken out and murdered in front of their neighbors as an example. And I'm reading what you're saying here, and it resonated so much because I think so many of us have a story to tell like this. And yeah, it does make a difference. And here I watch the expressions on my great-grandkids' faces, and they're holding this picture. And I know they know their names and they know the story.
And that matters so much. Thank you for sharing such a deep and personal part of your family life. And I truly believe there are echoes of that great loss in the good work that you do, and we can spend a lifetime not realizing that our forefathers, our ancestors are whispering to us, in between every time we press down that shutter. It is so much more than making something that looks good after some Photoshop and Lightroom. That's 9% at most of an image. The history of who you are, who your parents were, what has made you, what has forged you into the man that you've become today, sir, has to come through in your image. It has to. And that's what I'm dedicating the portion of my storytelling life to. And also helping other people understand that it's much more than an Instagram post.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, it is. It is.
I don't know if you guys saw the recent Pete Souza documentary, which I just cried my way through the whole damn thing. Yes. The way I see it, Ronald Reagan, Nancy Reagan, and Barack and Michelle Obama's photographer, and
yes, of course,
the humility of this man, for decades to capture the lives of others and to be somewhat invisible in huge moments in the history of the modern world, but also to teach all of us the importance, once again, the importance of the still image. The one bit where I just couldn't take it anymore in terms of how it inspired me to keep shooting is, after the former President Obama had to speak after a shooting. It was one of the worst shootings that happened in his time. And Pete captures him tearing up and running to find any of his two daughters just to hold on so they could steady his sails. And I was just like, my God, what a privilege to be able to hold a camera and capture these moments of humanity.
Yes, that was after the shootings in Connecticut, and I remember that very well. And you're right about the documentary. It's wonderful, wonderful. Can I jump in and ask a little bit about maybe, the evolution of your style over the past few years?
Sure.
I mean,
Sure.
When we see your work now, it's kind of a very clear style. But did it take you some time to get to that, or did you? I mean, with all the kind of the experience / non-experience you had over the years, were you ready to just hit the ground running with the black and white images that you're kind of known for?
Yeah, I mean, black and white has always been a clear choice. If I have to do something in color, it's usually because a brand is insisting. But when it's my work that I want to leave on this earth, it's definitely black and white. And I think that has a lot to do with my never-ending relationship with light. And, I see light as a human being, as a person that I am forever courting, taking this person to dinner, screaming from down at, I'm a mere mortal, and it's a sort of celestial being that floats through life. And,
that's true.
We glance. I mean, I guess I see light as a woman with ungodly powers, that we should yield at a glance, and with a glance, this woman of light can start or end a war.
Yeah.
And, as image makers, we hope that she gazes upon us even momentarily so we can help the world see in the fidelity of what light brings to all of us. So, that is why I shoot in black and white, because there are nuances between the highlights and the shadows, as you all know, that are universes in itself. There's no small talk in black and white as well. So with my photojournalism work, it cuts to the bone. In fact, you can't defend yourself against a good black and white image. It gets into the parts of yourself that you threw the key away a long, long time ago. And that is a great weapon to have when trying to tell an important story.
Oh,
so
I love
the
that
question I have, and again, I hate to become technical right now. We're on a roll of such a level right now, but you've only been shooting for a few years, and you shoot black and white, and there aren't too many options for shooting black and white. Are you shooting color and converting? What exactly are you doing as far as getting your final black and white images?
So I have a monochrome, like a monochrome camera.
Oh, okay, all right.
With a monochrome sensor, incredible ISO performance. And I also have created my own digital emulsion, if you like, which I can convert from RAW to the black and white that many people have seen as my work.
You mentioned this phrase that we hear so much lately, this imposter syndrome. I mean, was that something that you really felt? And was it really just about, as they say, practice and getting comfortable and getting out there and shooting? Was it really that, or was there kind of a moment maybe where you thought to yourself, you know what, I am doing what I want to be doing, and it's the real thing?
I think all of us are part of what society constructs for us is to be something that is acceptable to a wide range of people. And if you're creative and you've been, the society is saying you should be a doctor or a lawyer or something that is, recognized by the masses as seemingly successful. And then if you are like me, someone who failed just about every exam he ever took, right, and is a university dropout, society tells you that you're not going to be good at much, But if you look back at your inner child, look back at that young boy, usually that child will tell you who you are. And if I look back at the boy I was a boy that was a wonder at anything that made me feel alive, whether it's watching Back to the Future or listening to Joni Mitchell or Nina Simone. It's all in the same spectrum. I always yearned for something that switched on my emotional engine. You know, I remember looking at Mary Ellen Mark's work for the first time, and I was just like, what is this? You know, it was insatiable at consuming so many photographers' work. Or the first time I saw Barry Lyndon, Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon, and which I will go on record to say is the most beautiful film I've ever seen, and it's the most beautiful use of light that I've ever seen.
I second that motion. We have to have a separate conversation about that movie sometime.
I mean, it's astonishing, and if you were just to take screens, stills, they could be in a museum. And you know, we all know the legendary stories of how most of the indoor scenes are shot with just candlelight and the Zeiss lens that was converted from NASA.
And it was the depth of field was so shallow that for the close-ups, the actors and actresses had to have their heads in braces so they would not move back and forth. Otherwise, their eyes would be out of focus.
Pure blur, yeah. Amazing. Amazing. And you know, for all of these artists, though, that have done the work, who are we to not be bothered to understand the importance of light and storytelling with light? So I think that's why I jumped very quickly, is that I've actually been training for this since I was like 5 or 6 years old. The tool of which my training was preparing me for only found me recently. But my eye, you know, there's that quote that I use a lot by Robert Frank, you know, the eye should learn to listen before it looks, right? And I strongly believe that. You know, I strongly believe that.
Can I ask this is a question that may be tough to answer and maybe not, but I mean, and I think a lot of us can understand this idea, especially, you know, those of us who have studied images, and we feel that same pulse running through us when something touches it, whether it's music or an image or literature. And now here you are, and you're creating those images, and you're offering that to other people now, and they're feeling it. I mean, does that give you a sense of satisfaction? Does it, I mean, honestly, does it feel good? Or is it, you know, or is it just a humbling thing to kind of feel like you're part of a great tradition?
It feels good in the sense that I think I'm helping people question themselves. You know, as a Black man, I've lived with institutional and systematic racism. And if I can use my images to have people from all walks of life, from all socioeconomic backgrounds and gender and race backgrounds, to look at my image and make them just pause and think, you know what? Maybe there is something that I'm not seeing. Maybe I don't have the lived experience of so many of these men and women that have suffered for no good reason. And maybe I can go on this journey of education and understand why the world is the way it is, with the hope that we can make the future a better place for all of us as one. That is a primary objective of my imagery. And, you know, the good thing about imagery, especially the images I take with signs, and I love to talk about this, is when you look at a picture of a protester with a sign, you read that sign in your own voice. And I find that to be incredibly powerful. I've had so many people who have looked at my images and said, you know what, I looked at that picture and I read that sign, and it made me just sit down and review what I thought the world was from another lens. Mm-hmm. And that is a job that I'm doing by pressing the shutter. So I feel very proud to be able to do that. But I also know that I've got a lot of work to do, because I'm not just fighting for people that look for myself. I'm fighting from any marginalized voice, which includes women, people with both visible and invisible disabilities, people on the full spectrum of what it is to have a different gender or different view of sexuality. And then climate change and sustainability, something I also believe in. I want my lens to be at the tip of the spear, fighting for all of these people who, for whatever reason, haven't had the chances that maybe you and I have had in life. So that's my job.
If I could interject just for a second here, what you just said, I would say that a lot of listeners connect with, and I'm sure a lot of photographers who are not listening have these same thoughts and same wants and same focus that you have, for lack of a better word. You, however, in a short period of time, have managed to get your pictures in front of the people who can get them out there so that your pictures can, in fact, make that difference. How did you do that? What somebody had to hold your hand and make that initial connection. What's the story behind that, if I may ask?
It's the most organic of stories, which again, I want people listening to believe that they got a shot. You have to understand that my first ever fashion shoot ever was the most important cover in a generation for British Vogue. It wasn't like I'd been in the industry shooting a whole bunch of fashion models. I'd never done it before.
So what's the pressure?
Yeah, that's my whole life, by the way. I jump from one frying pan to another. But I think the point is, after the murder of George Floyd, I had run out of tears. I had nothing left anymore. And my wife just said, look to your camera. And I went out there and I started shooting. I didn't know whether anyone would care or see my images. I went out there because it's the only little thing I thought I could do in his memory, right? To try and capture the hope and solidarity of people who in general are good, who walking the streets of London to say that your death, Mr. Floyd, will never be in vain. That's what I wanted to do. That's all. And I put the images on Instagram and woke up the next morning to all my friends saying, dude, everyone's sharing your images. And, and then the next morning, the son of Martin Luther King himself had used one of my images to make a statement. And then the mayor of London, and then Sarah Jessica Parker, and then Diddy. And then, it just went, I do not know these people. These are not friends of mine. And it speaks truth to purpose to say sometimes your work just comes into its own. And I think it's a marriage of my deep personal connection to that movement as a person of color, and the fact that people were at home, people had the time to truly reflect, and these images hit them exactly where it needed to. So off the back of that viral wave of attention, the editor-in-chief of British Vogue saw my images. And he is somebody that doesn't need anyone to tell him when he knows that he's found a voice that he wants to support. And that's exactly what he did. He put me, an unknown photographer, relative to Vogue's. I mean, can you imagine the options you have for the September issue of British Vogue? And God only knows how he pushed back on whoever he needed to have an unknown photographer to shoot. And he also allowed me, and this is the extraordinary thing about Edward Enninful, he goes, Misan, I want you to do it your way. Just capture their truth your way. And that's an extraordinary thing to do. And it's empowering someone because you believe in their ability. And I will never, ever forget that as long as I live. That man, he's a very humble man, but he changed my life by allowing me to know that I am good enough to do something that was incredibly important. And of course, he, a month later or so, was on the cover of Time magazine for the extraordinary work that he did with the whole issue. I call it his symphony of activism.
Wow. So something I have to add, and that's a good way of framing it. When you were handed that assignment, and then with that little extra asterisk, okay, and do it your way, that's major right there. I have to ask you, how terrified were you at that moment? Because that is an awful responsibility that you were handed to.
It was a Zoom call, as many things are these days, and I just had to focus on not fainting during. That was my only focus for the rest of the call. I was like, are you still with us? I was like, Miss Annie, you're breathing, and I did that, and as soon as I ended the call, I just had the most debilitating anxiety attack, thinking I'm not good enough. This is too much now. You've hustled your way into a situation that is way above your pay grade, kid.
If you're not careful, you get what you ask for. That's
imposter syndrome.
But this is the thing about my, having partners, wives, boyfriends, husbands that they don't. My wife is Swedish and there's no BS in her. And she came back to the house and I told her, I'm not good enough. I can't do this. And she goes, just look at your work. Look at your work and tell me that you can't do this. And, she always has a way of making me steady my sails and look toward the horizon.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. We come back more with Misan Harriman. Stay tuned. This episode of the B&H Photography Podcast is sponsored by Leica Camera. Check out the M10R digital rangefinder from Leica and all of their incredible cameras and lenses by following the link in our show notes. Okay, we are back. A reminder, you can go over to our show notes if you want to look at some of Misan's work as we speak about it. And we are back to the show. John, you had a question. Go for it.
Yes, thanks, Alan. And again, thank you, Misan. I kind of wanted to jump back a little bit to working the protests and kind of get a sense, of your workflow, of the ideas that you had as the days started and how you kind of worked through the days. Did you, were you out every day? Did you have context that would tell you where protests might pop up? And, just generally your workflow throughout these tough days.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the beginning, you don't really know what's going to happen. So the first few protests, I was meeting mainly the young women. The oxygen of a lot of the anti-racist movement have been young women that have been arranging their health and safety, getting permission from the government, making sure COVID protocols are met, and a WhatsApp group was created and they would tell me when the next protest would be nationwide, and I would go to every single one that I could. I only shoot with prime. Actually, I have one big zoom, but in general, I shoot with prime lenses. I like big glass. So unlike a lot of photojournalists, I will turn up in a protest with, a 90mm or 135mm lens. Mm-hmm. And it does make my job not easy, but it allows me to tell the story with a sense of intimacy that makes my work in many ways stand apart from what many people have seen. So I never have a plan. I just turn up an hour early, make sure I understand the lay of the land, and I observe with my lens. And, when you're using big glass, it helps. Number one, in the age of COVID, you don't need to get close to anyone. And number two, it allows you to capture these incredibly powerful moments without getting in the way of the story, without getting in the way of the important, purposeful work that I observed in my images. So that's really what I do. And I've come to terms that, all the great images that we take as photographers, they come to us. We don't go to them. So, when people get frustrated when something is kicking off, as we say in England, and I see 20, hardened photojournalists all run in the same direction, that's usually my cue to completely go in the opposite direction. Right. And, just do my thing. I'm a bigger guy. I'm not as fit as some of these young chaps that are running around doing the splits and hanging off trees. And I just go in my own pace. I really do. And my stories will come to me. The stories that I'm supposed to be telling with my cameras, I feel fate. I always say waltz with fate, mm-hmm. and the results would speak for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And did you ultimately ever, find news outlets that were asking for your work, other than Vogue and down the line? But in the early days of the photos of the protests and the photography you were doing, did you have outlets for the work?
I didn't. I mean, I'm sure they would have been interested, but I wasn't interested,
right?
Because
This is what I'm asking, yeah.
I was very concerned about the narrative, and you have to understand. There are aspects of news media that can take a picture that I've taken and say that it was something that I didn't see. And I just didn't want my images to be taken out of context. And I knew that if it was on my Instagram with my observation of what I saw, it would be the truth that I'm looking to be the custodian of. So I really was very wary of, the big media agencies, because I wasn't sure which way it would go. And I had seen other photographers end up being very, very disappointed with their images being taken out of context.
And saying that you were shooting with prime lenses mostly, how many cameras did you carry with you?
Usually 5.
All right.
Usually 5, yeah. I mean,
I did see a picture of you with about 5 around your neck, and I wasn't sure if that was just posed image.
No, I don't play. I need 50. That's about as close as I'll get, unless I always have a Leica Q on me, which is 28. But in general, I have a 50. And the 75, that Apo 75 that goes on the SL. So I shoot with 2 SLs, and the full range of the f2 lenses that I think are the finest lenses ever made for a digital camera. I really do think they're extraordinary. They're all the same size, and the rendering that you get from them is really astonishing, and the speed of the autofocusing system that in protest work you do need, because things can happen very, very fast, and manual focusing when there's you're in the midst of 5,000 people and emotions are high can be somewhat difficult. So trusting, and the other thing I love about the SL system and any Leica system that I've used is, with my dyslexia, I truly get panic attacks when I try and use, I won't name the other brands, but certain other brands that have menu system after menu system after, I can't, my brain is not wired that way. And I get upset, and it doesn't work for me. So the idea that I can use a camera where I barely have to even think of the menu system, and I know the outside, the body of the camera, blindfolded, is crucial for me in the sort of work and the sort of style that I like to shoot.
So based on that, you then went and took an incredibly wonderful photograph of Prince Harry and his lovely bride announcing their second child. And you shot that remotely using an iPad which has technically a wide-angle lens, the opposite of what you like using. So this was, and you talk about you love the intimacy of working with your subjects. This is the antithesis of intimacy. You're working remotely from another place, and you're not even using a quote-unquote real camera. So what was that like?
Well, I think image making, regardless of whether you're there physically or not, is an intimate process. So there are 2, and this is a good shout out to give to them. There are 2 companies, Clos, CLOS, and Shutter app, that have very good ability for you to take over an iPhone or an iPad, and then you speak into your phone, so the subject on the other side can hear your voice, and you can download raw files onto a Dropbox or onto your own phone. So it really is an extraordinarily powerful way to shoot people when you cannot be there. So with the Duke and Duchess, it felt very intimate to me. They could hear my voice, and I captured their truth in the images that the world has seen. And in fact, this morning, this is an exclusive for you because no one knows this, but I shot one of the most important men in the arts world, Dr. Piotrovsky, who is the director of the largest museum in the world, the State Hermitage in St. Petersburg, Russia. And it was amazing because I had somebody helping me, holding the camera and taking direction. And we shot this extraordinary gentleman in the great halls of this incredible museum. And it didn't feel like we were hundreds of miles away from each other. And the results, as you'll see when they come out, don't feel that way too. So there are no limitations to image making, especially with the information superhighway allowing us to virtually shake hands and get busy with the storytelling.
So you actually use an assistant as a surrogate yourself in a way. So they're holding your camera, for lack of better, because that's really what it is at that point. And then you're basically there. He or she hears what you're saying, and so you are able to position this person the way you want it. So
exactly. I press the shutter from where I am. So I'm that decisive moment is still mine. I know when to, and that's the thing about photography. Photography is knowing when to press that shutter. Mm-hmm. Sensing that moment. And I feel that all the great pictures that I've taken are telling me it's time. It's time. Press that shutter.
So on that note, let me ask you another question. You keep feeding me great ideas for questions. I cannot thank you enough. But you do have me thinking about things, and you're talking about being able to see what's going on and knowing the moment to press the shutter. We were recently talking with another guest who is also a Leica user, and we were talking about the fact that you could see what's going on beyond your frame lines when you're shooting with a Leica M camera or a rangefinder camera, especially if you're using, say, a 35 millimeter focal length and the finder is 28. So you could see what's outside the frame and you could anticipate things or people or stuff that's going on that might be entering the frame or leaving it, or to know even better when to hit the shutter button. You use a Leica monochrome. You mentioned that, Leica M cameras, which are rangefinders, and you can use those with EVFs. But the SL is specifically a mirrorless camera, and you are looking through an electronic finder that shows you 100% of what you are going to be recording, but you don't see beyond the frame lines like you do with an M. Do you find that does that bother you at all, or does it not make a difference to you?
No, I love modern EVFs as well. I mean, the technologies, I think over the last 3 years has jumped. I don't know how many million dots the SL one has, but it's extraordinary. And the fact that you can see your exposure in real time. So fundamentally, you can see exactly what the finished image will be, gives me great confidence when I don't have, this isn't like studio shooting where I can just light everything perfectly and have a million takes. When you're shooting, a world events and protests, you have one take at best. So to have this EVF, to know that everything is well exposed and in focus is priceless for this sort of work that we're doing.
Maybe I
agree with you. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, maybe we can jump over to some of your portraiture work, because it is in some ways polar opposite in terms of that need to have that one moment captured quickly. But do you? What other set of skills do you use when you're working in a portrait setting and you have a chance to take many photos? Often, not always, but
I recently I just shot a national treasure, a global treasure, Kate Winslet, and those images mean a lot to me because it's real portraiture. So what I mean by that is I try and not get anywhere near a studio if I can help it. Mm-hmm. Almost all the subjects I try, even when they book a studio for me, I'll drag them out and we'll get on the streets. But I shot Kate as the sun was setting in West Sussex on the English coastline, late summer last year. There was no hair and makeup. There were no bodyguards or assistants. I had no assistants, and it was, as I call it, God's light and this remarkable woman.
So all just natural light, no bounce, nobody else moving anything.
Nothing, no reflectors, not a damn thing. It is just light.
And then, other than this light that we keep referring to and we understand, how about just the personal interaction and when you need to ask for another photo or give direction?
This is the thing, and Kate worked with Peter Lindbergh a lot, and you have to have an understanding with your subject. So I think most great photographs in terms of portraiture, 90% of the time I have with the subject is not holding a camera. It's understanding. It's an exchange of humanity. It's an exchange of their hopes and their fears and an understanding of who they are today. And, with Kate, she's just such a graceful human being. And, she wanted to show the woman that she is today. And I felt that not only did those images show that, but those images are not retouched, which is extremely rare for somebody at her level, and for it to be published in a national magazine, The Observer, I would dare say, I don't know of any major cover that has no retouching, that is taken off somebody that is at that level of fame.
And did you know that going in?
Sorry?
Did you know that going in that there would be?
That was what I wanted to do, and
okay.
I made it very clear to everyone involved in the project that let's try and do this. And
mm-hmm.
So that was your idea to have her go. Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, but you can't do that without collaborating with her. And
sure,
it's a testament of a woman who is incredibly comfortable in who she is.
Literally comfortable in her skin. Yeah. Literally.
Yeah. And if you look at those images, she's just glowing. I'm so proud of that. So, just from going back to the question that you were asking about when I do portrait sessions, I try and make them be as candid as possible. So, walk and shoot. So it doesn't matter how famous you are. I'll say, can you have them meet me in, at the top of Portobello Road in Notting Hill? And I'll just turn up with my backpack and that's it. And I'll politely ask their handlers to go and have a coffee, and then we'll just walk and shoot. And I'll find spots of light reflecting off whatever, and just a bit of caveman lighting coming into alcoves, and just shoot them in living life out loud. And I think that's another reason why so many of my images do maybe pop a little bit, because they are situations that aren't planned. There are actual moments that my lens is able to observe, and that's my signature style. Yes, of course, you can get me in a studio and I can do a lovely cover for you, and have 5 assistants and 8 million lights and all those things.
Catering truck.
Catering. But I feel there's an honesty in shooting as you see it that many industries have tried to kill, that I'm doing my darndest to bring back, because I genuinely believe that there is a truth to those images that is impossible to replicate in any other way.
Something I just want a compliment to you. When I was looking at your work, especially the Black Lives Matter work, photographs, for some reason, I kept thinking about Life magazine and Look magazine, which I remember those magazines from back in the day. And your style and the quality of your style and the quality of your imagery is just so reminiscent of that. It has the same feel of sort of a golden age of photojournalism. Is really the way I look at it in many, many ways.
Oh, thank you, sir. That makes me feel like I'm somewhat on my way to taking
You're there. You're okay.
Maybe I can ask a bit about that, and to some degree, this is tangential, but and you mentioned Lindbergh, and I saw some of the other photographers you mentioned as influences. What about photos from Africa? I mean, do you have any influences from African photographers? Obviously.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say yes, definitely, and Black photographers. And women, I think, as well. Photographers, I put them in their own class because they rarely get celebrated enough. But everyone from African American photographers to people like Seydou Keita, to Malik Sidibe, to J.D. Ojekere from Nigeria, where I'm from, Solomon Osage Alonge. So, I mean, I am unapologetic nerd of image makers. That's it's all I pretty much did before picking up a camera, was obsess over people like Moneta Sleet Jr., whose images won him the first Pulitzer the first black man to win a Pulitzer, and his images of Coretta Scott King in her husband Martin Luther King's funeral are images that were tattooed into my soul. When you see a woman that's somehow looking graceful at the funeral of her assassinated husband, whilst having her baby girl, her daughter Bernice, on her lap, I mean, I don't know how old I was when I first saw that, but I knew that, okay, pictures are more than just a group photo around a birthday cake. There's a lot more to this gig, and it matters. It really matters. And what I love so much is technology has moved on, but the still image is arguably more important now than it ever was before. And with all the rendered 3D things you can do in CGI and special effects, the honesty of a photograph, is something that human beings, I keep saying this, cannot defend themselves against. It's like our operating systems just stop working when a proper image is put in front of us. And that's exactly what we're looking to do.
Misan, absolutely wonderful speaking with you. We've had many photographers on this podcast, to say the least, but I could say that your photographs and your soul are extremely well connected. It's nice to see one's heart and soul tied directly to the pictures that you're taking. It's just all there. If our listeners would like to see more of your work, where can they go?
They should just go to either whatwesee.com, where you see some of my projects and lots of other people's projects, or just check me out on the gram. It's just my name, Misan Harriman, on the gram. I would say this, that I have a lot of interesting projects ongoing and things coming up. One of the ones that I think is worth sharing is I have a project with Google Arts and Culture, called Black Lenses Matter. And it's me working with my friends at Google in shining a light on black photographers that, if it was merit alone, should be household names, and hoping that more of you see and celebrate their work for what it truly is. So if you ever have a moment, just download the Google Arts and Culture app and type in What We See or Misan Harriman, and you will see a celebration of diverse voices using the still image.
That's great. That will all be in our show notes, along with links to your website, your Instagram and stuff. And I strongly urge our listeners to take a look at our guest's work. Again, Misan Harriman, thank you so much again for joining us. If you enjoy listening to the B&H Photography Podcast and you subscribe to our show, Lordy love you, bless your heart. If you are not a subscriber, all you have to do is go to Spotify or wherever you snag your favorite podcast and type in B&H Photography Podcast, hit enter, and you'll feel a slight pinch, sort of like a flu shot, and boom, it's all over and you're in. And you could always find us on the B&H Explorer website and on the B&H Photography Podcast Facebook group page. Unless told otherwise, my name is Alan Weitz, and on behalf of John Harris and Jason Tables, thank you so much for tuning in today.
Alan?
Yes?
Can I say one more thing?
Please.
And, Leica certainly haven't asked me to say this, but it's an important point to make, because so many people are spending quite a lot of money on their camera systems. And I will say this. If you're buying a camera system that is primarily for photography, all right? Not a hybrid system, but you're going to take mostly pictures with it. I would strongly ask the people that are listening to think about the SL1 system. So not the SL2, because that may be beyond your budget. But if you look at the pricing of the SL system now, the secondhand mint condition SL body, and you factor in that Leica have this relationship, the L-mount alliance with Panasonic and Sigma, you can get one of the extraordinary Sigma art lenses that will work with autofocus on the Leica SL system for less than it costs to get some of the obvious full-frame mirrorless systems that are out there. And that camera, the images that camera comes up with just blow my mind every time. So I just wanted to put that out there. Don't be intimidated by the idea of, Leica is too expensive. The Leica SL 35mm full-frame mirrorless body married to Sigma glass is affordable relative to how much people are spending on other known brand names.
And they do keep it simple.
Yeah, definitely. I'll say it again. SL, and start with that Sigma 1.4 art. That's like $400, I think, maybe cheaper. You'd be amazed at the results of that combination will give you.
And with that, thank you again for joining us so much today. Take care.
Take care.